Okay, let's have this one. Eccentrically loaded connections. Okay, so we have here the figure shows an eccentrically loaded bracket. P is equal to 15 kilonewton. Bolt diameter is 28 mm. If theta is equal to 0, ibig sabihin your P is vertically applied. Determine the shearing stress acting on the most critical bolt. Okay, so nanglitan amin an group of bolts nimo. Okay, so kung sugad nga nito yung group of bolts, masayon lang pagbiling it iya centroid. The centroid of the bolts is somewhere here. Di ba masayon la kung sugad hini? Mas masayon kung symmetric kasi madali pagbiling hit imo centroid. Tapos may nimo P din hi. Here, P is acting at a certain eccentricity. That's why it's called the centrically loaded connection. At a certain eccentricity. Pag measured eccentricity is always from the centroid of the group of bolts to the force. Okay? So, yung bibiling din is the shear stress dawhan pinaka-critical nga bolts. Para ma-demonstrate sinisili nga critical, pag dugang pakitahin usa pa nga row. So, ano din iti centroid. Okay, so it nananabuhin din syempre this assembly right here ini nga figure, this is actually equal to this one. May dani mo dida sinistring naton nga torque, tas may dani mo dida and of course and P acting now at the centroid of the group of bolts. Okay, so it effect is equal to the effect of this one. Okay, kung wala eccentricity, kung nanilit P, it na-experience lang mga bolts is of course are shear stress lang ahaw, di ba? Shear stress lang ahaw. Pero ang forces is all upward. If we are trying to solve for the action-reaction. Di ba? Nag-react man it mga bolts iton. So it mga kuan iton, if the P is at the centroid, is acting at the centroid of the group of bolts, it tanan nga ma-experience didahan bolts dida is only tanan la upward. Okay, kay wala man eccentricity. Kaya ano kung may eccentricity? May nga ni eccentricity, nakakamay-ada hiyahin torque. Okay, so nakakamay-ada hiyahin torque, adto nga torque will in turn cause shearing stress sa mga bolts. Okay, because of this torque. Okay? This torque right here is equal to P times E. So duduha. Ano ibig sabihin nito? 'Di ba tanan nga forces, tanan nga stresses dida ka bolt are sharing. Diri man niya magkakamay adahin kuan tension. Diri ang tense kay it force nimo is however you look at it is always parallel to the cross-sectional area of the bolt. So permito niya sharing stress. That's why sharing stress again bibiling. For the sake of discussion, let's name the bolt. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is 6. Okay, there are 6 bolts. Okay, and bolt 1, dili kita. And bolt 1, ang iya na experience nga stress is due to the force P applied downwards o ma-upward. Tapos ang bolt 2, same, di ba? Asya init ira ma-experience nga mga forces. Nakita nito nga mga arrows. Asya ito nit iya na-experience nga mga forces. Kung force pila ang nag-a-act. Takay may da man kita torque. Because may eccentricity, may da kita torque. Okay? Because of the torque, magkakamay-ada kita shearing stress due to the torque. Okay, so how do we put it here? Take note that the torque is clockwise because obviously P is the mag-generate nga moment hand P is clockwise man. So the torque is clockwise. So for bolt 1, okay, adimate aton centroid. For bolt 1, ma-react man hiya So may da niya force, let us use another color. May da niya force tipakadi, may da niya force tipakadto. Do you agree? Kasi in reality, if iyaton force is whatever the distance niya nga relate centroid is perpendicular to this distance. Nakita niyo, ini nga force is perpendicular to the distance between the bolt 1 nga non-centroid. Perpendicular itong hiya. But since perpendicular man hiya, the orientation niya is diagonal in respect to the x and y axis. So may niya sinisiring nga x component and y component. So that's why instead nga express natin nini as this one, gini-express natin niya as its component. May niya nasugad didi, tapos may niya downward. Di ba? Nasugad. O tapos ang bolt 2 naman, may niya nasugad. Ngayon, what do you think is the other direction? Upward, di ba? Upward. Kaya ano upward? Kasi maaram kita, it forces, kita daw niya. Let me erase again. Kaya ano to the left ngayon upward? Kasi if you try to determine the distance niya, ang iya ko is nasugad. Diba? So may niya to the left, may niya upward. Or usually di habos ibubutang. Pwede ko man dito hababaw ibutang, di ba? Nagigets niyo. I'm hoping nagigets niyo. Okay? Kaya ano nga na counterclockwise ang mga direction and forces for the bolts or the reaction of the bolts? Kasi ang applied nga torque clockwise. Ang reaction hand bolts counterclockwise. Nagigets? Di ba? So, nasa ring. Tapos may dito pabaw-baw. Then ipabaw-baw gihap. Tapos waray niya kuan, waray niya y component, x component kay mama. Waray man niya kuan moment arm for the x component because it will just pass through with the centroid. Diba? Hindi may the upward and may the to the right. Hindi may the gap to the right and may the this one naman downward. Downward again. Okay, take note, the black arrows are due to the reaction of the bolts due to the P. Your P is downward. Okay? Your and red naman is due to the torque, which is clockwise. Kita daw it mga arrowhan and mga red arrows. Tanan nga red arrows dida, it moment nga ma-generate tanan ng mga red arrows are all counterclockwise with respect to the centroid of the group of bolts. Okay? Then kita naman niyo it directionhan arrowhan mga black dida ha mga bolts. Tanan upward because nga the force applied to the system is downward. So ang reaction hand bolts upward. Ako nga, take note, all of these forces are shear forces. Okay? Because we are talking about the cross-sectional area. The force on the bolt and the cross-sectional area of the bolts are all parallel to each other. So tanan ini nga mga forces here are all shear forces. Now, my question is, between bolts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hain dida nga bolt, it pinaka-vulnerable. Kita daw niyo. Hain nga bolts, it pinaka-vulnerable.
Ada corner.
Hain nga corner. Is it 1, 2, 3? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and number 6. Hain dida, it pinaka most vulnerable. Anyone? Kita daw niyo mga arrows. Let's say for example number 1, bolt number 1. Paano natin kikitaon? Say this force kita niyo ha. Nakita niyo ta akong cursor. Ini daw nga force, adi nga force, both are shear forces ha. They will somewhat parang a portion of them will cancel out because they are oppositely directed. Okay? Tapos, pagkuha naman ng error resultant, you just need to use the square root of fx squared plus fy squared, di ba? So, for their fy, some part of them will cancel out because they are this force right here and this force right here are oppositely directed. They may be not on the same magnitude, but since they are oppositely directed, some of those forces will cancel out. Diba? Nagigitsak niyo? Okay. So, kita naman yung bolt number 2. Sa bolt number 2, this force and this force are, they are on the same direction. So, they will just add up. Okay? Then, for this force naman, ini nga force, never mind this force kasi pag-determine error resultant, atang gagamit is the square root of fx squared plus fy squared, diba? Sila ang pag-determine. So, an imo Fy din is the combination of this force and this one. Because they are on the same direction. Diba? O, kitaan niyo didihit. It number 3 and 4. It number 3 and 4. Kita, for number 3, they are oppositely directed. This one and this one. So, some portion of that will cancel out. Tapos it yan they are on the same direction pero wala nira y x component, di ba? Kitaan naman didi. They are kita number 6, they are also opposite they are also on the same direction an era y. Tapos an era x naman is to the right. Okay lang, to the right and x. Tapos an naman number 5, this force and this force are opposite directed so magka-cancel out. Some portion of them will cancel out. Ini pa yung dapat tigamnan. The magnitude of these forces are just directly proportional to its distance, perpendicular distance from the centroid. Okay? Pumati ka ma. The magnitude of these forces, except lang yung mga black. Kasi yung black, this is due to the force P. Di ba? To determine the magnitude of these blocks, nga mga forces, nga mga black arrow, you just need to divide the P by how many volts. Amuleton hit the magnitude. Okay. Now for the red arrows naman, red forces, it magnitude dito nitong mga red forces are directly proportional to its distance from the centroid. Okay, this is your centroid. Tapos ini nga arrow, since this arrow and this arrow or this force and this force are on the same distance from the centroid, perpendicular distance. Diba the same distance? This is your centroid. The distance of this arrow and the distance of this arrow are the same perpendicular distance. So ibig sabihin, we can conclude therefore that the magnitude of this force and this force are the same since they are the same distance. Tingnan niya kan, di ba? The magnitude of the force is just directly proportional to its distance from the centroid. Nakuha. So, ibig sabihin, pareho ulit magnitude hini, ganyan hi. Also, this force and this force are just the same. Also, this force, ini nga force, tas ini. Tanan nga y component nga red, magpapreho because its distance from the perpendicular distance from the centroid are the same. Diba? Tanan gihap nga x, magpapreho kahit iya distance mantikan magpareho man, diba? Magpareho man iti distance. Nakakanamdum kamuhan kuan, flexure. Diba? If you have a fiber here and a fiber here, if those fiber are on the same distance from the centroid or from the neutral axis, iya iton magnitude is the same. Nag-iibala iya direction. Ito sa compression, ito sa tension. Same din It pagkakaibala din is, this is torque, di ba? And the shear stress from the torque is equal to TR over J. Di ba? TR over J. Tapos naman, stress naman due to bending is equal to MC over I. Nakakita niyo yung pagkakapareho nila. Diba? Stress, shear stress, bending stress. Torque is also a moment. R is the distance from the, R again? R is the distance from the point where you are getting the stress to the centroid. So for example, if you are getting the stress at bolt 1, for this force right here, imo gikukuha dito nga distance, ini nga distance. Parang same lagap ito ni C, di ba? C is the distance from the neutral axis to the fiber where you are getting the stress. And I naman, this is the moment of inertia, and J naman is polar moment of inertia. Polar moment of inertia because torque naman hiya. Yung torque here is torque. Torque. So parang di ba, nakikita niyo pagkakapareho, parang the same here. Anyway, balik kita dito topic. Okay, so to answer the question, hain nga bolt, it pinaka-vulnerable? Anyone?
216.
216. The most vulnerable here is number bolts 2 and 6. Okay? Bolts 2 and 6 is pinaka-vulnerable. So very gani nga ay pinaka-vulnerable. Oh, maram na kamo. Okay, 2 and 6. So actually pareho ulit era stress, di ba? It 2 and 6 it era na experience nga stress. They are just the same since pareho malit era mga forces. It direction let magkakaiba. Okay, so let us try to solve ha. Okay, una natin i-solve and block. Take note, edit aton kuan ha, adyan naton forces. You have the force P and your torque which is P times E. Unahong talaan ay ang mga block, anyan hinga mga forces. So how do we solve that? The value of that we are solving for the stress before we can solve for the stress, let's us try to solve the anay ng mga forces. Okay? And force la anay. Let's name this, ano ba ang ngaran nito? Force due to P. Okay, force on the bolt due to P. Hanito nga P, adi di ba? Adi nga P. Adi yan P. Okay? So, because of that P, nagre-react ini nga mga bolts. Since your P is acting at the centroid, take note ha, again, solution naton. Adi ang given. Kuha natin ang equivalent na loading. The equivalent loading is this one. Diba? Now, take note that P is acting at the centroid. How do we solve for the value of the stresses or the forces? Forces pala, not the stresses. How do we solve for the forces at each bolt given that you have a P acting at the centroid? Di na nakitahan P, an effect lang ni P. Pag solve ito nga mga force, let's name it F na lang, for force, not to be confused with flexural stress. F is just equal to the force P acting at the centroid divided by how many bolts. The number of bolts here is 6. And another one are the forces naman due to the torque. Take note, your torque is equal to P times E. So how do we solve that? Balik kita didihan formula. This one. Shear stress is equal to torque PR over J. Your P is the torque, your R is the radius, the distance from the point to the bolt, times the J. Okay, nasa ring. Solve ko dito. This is the shear stress is equal to TR over J. Diba? Your stress here, this is actually equals to the force over the area, the cross-sectional area of the bolts. But this is T times R. Your J is given by, your J is just the summation of Ix and Iy. Diba? Ix and Iy. How do we solve for Ix again? For the moment of inertia, this is just the summation of INA plus AD squared. Diba? Aminute formula. Your INA here will be equal to 0, almost equal to 0. Neglect natin ng INA because that's just the area of the bolts. INA man ito, diba? INA of each hole or of each cross-sectional area of the bolts. Since that's just very small, your INA is almost equal to 0. This is negligible. Ano ito ang INA circle? Sige daw. That is the pi d raised to 4 over 64. Is this right? Pi d raised to 4 over 64. Your d here is very small. Then, i-multiply mo a raised to power of 4 mo pa. Titikagotin ito ng duru-duruhan. Tapos, i-divide pa yung 64. Diba? Nakita niyo? That's why, ginineglect natin ito ng quantity. So, for your I here, ito lang yung gagamit la as ID squared. The summation of ID squared. This is your I. So, for IX, AD squared X. AD squared Y pala. Distance from Y. Then, for IY naman, this is equal the summation of AD X squared. Diba? Kung J nga ito ang bibiling, J, this is just equal to Ix plus I. May ito polar moment of inertia. Okay. So, God, ano? So, we can therefore say your J is equal to AD squared, summation, AD squared X pala, plus ADY squared. Is this right? You can factor out A, diba? J is equal to A, the summation of dx squared plus dy squared. Okay, or we can further simplify this one. Instead nga i-identify natin as dx and dy, i-identify na natin iniya as d squared. This is d squared. Where your d here, okay, take note your d is the distance from the centroid to the perpendicular distance from the centroid to the force. So tanan nga di ini, o including the distance sa along x ngayon along y. Okay? D squared. So this is your j. Ibutan ko didi ha. This is a summation of d squared. Di ba aman niya? Okay, take note that this force here is stress. Shear pala, V. Okay, so as you can see, you can eliminate A here, the area. So kung force lang yung bibiling, this is equal to the torque times the radius over, what's this? Summation of d squared. Maninit alang pagsosolve. So ano it shear force at, ay nakita to, at bolt number 2. Sige. Zoom out. Ano an aton shear force? Force ha, there is stress. At bolt number 2. Okay, and formula natin, shear force is equal to the torque times the R over the summation of d squared. Okay, let's solve first it yan nga force. Adilanay ha, adiman nakikita nito yan nga kuan. Okay, ada kita bolt 2. Nayakang kita ano ada kita bolt 2 again because bolt 2 is one of the most vulnerable bolts. This one, ano kita dida? That is the torque. Ano ang torque again? P times E multiplied ano R? The perpendicular distance from the centroid to that force. Okay? Ano tiya? That is this distance, di ba? Amit niya nga distance. Huwag ko rin makita mag-identify kung natin nga distance. Basta amit niya nga distance. Let's denote it as R over the summation of d squared. Ano yung summation of d squared? Ang tanan na nga bolts. Okay? Tanan na nga bolts. The summation of d squared. Ano nga d squared? The distance from the centroid to the bolt. Ini nga distance. Hindi ko i-explain. Kaya siya direct pa makuan. Ano nga d? Ini nga distance. Okay. Tapos ini nga distance. Amit yan d. D squared. Paano mo natin ma-determine ito nga d? For d1, this is d1. For d1, that is x square root of x1 squared plus y1 squared. Okay? Amit it mo d1. Or if you are trying to solve for d1 squared, that's just x1 squared plus y1 squared. Diba? So, ibig sabihin, for d2 squared, this is just x2 squared plus y2 squared. So, ibig sabihin, kung ginsasum up lang mo ang mga d, dinhi, ang mga d, mo lang ginsasum up, imo lang ngayon ginsasum up ang mga x and y components squared. Square of the x and y component of the distances from the centroid. Okay? So, mastering. Your summation of this squared here is just equal to, unang kuan, it number 1. Pananglitan la. For the sake of discussion, say this is 300, pananglitan. And this one, this is 400. So, ibig sabihin, katunga, 200. Okay. Katunga didi is 150. Pananglitan. So, your AD squared here will be, bolt 1 lang ha, bolt 1. So, the x of bolt 1, distance niya along the x from the centroid is 150 squared. Plus, ano yung y squared naman is 200 squared. Plus, bolt 2 na kita. Bolt 2, ano yung x distance is 150 again, squared, plus 200 squared. Nag-guess niyo? Plus, adi kita hit bolt 3. Ano yung x is 150 squared, ano yung y 0. Diba? And number 4 naman, 150 again. 150 squared. Plus, and bolt number 5, 150 squared plus 200 squared. Bolt number 6, 150 squared plus 200 squared. Diba? Nakikita niyo? Nag-gets ba niyo? This is how you solve for the summation of d squared. Okay? Or pwede gihap, bilbil mo mula it mga distances sit tanan ng mga bolts from the centroid or pwede gihap idiri sa mulan. Iyan na lang mga x and y component yung gamiton.
Sir, pati po sir ito nga bolt 3 and 4, maad pa po yung
Yes.
200 squared.
Yes. Okay ha? Idudugang gihap, iupod gihap ang distance and 3 and 4. Any other question? So basically, what you will get here is the value of your V. Anyan hi pala nga force, okay? Imo pa isosolve anya din nga force, the same solution in solving for the value of this force. Okay. Dili kita sample problem, dili kita kedi. Masay malain